What people over 60 understand about peace that the world forgot. There comes a moment in life when a person begins to see the world differently. It usually doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, over many years of living. At 20, the world often feels like a race to succeed, a race to prove something, a race to win. But somewhere along the road, usually after decades of living, loving, struggling, and losing, something begins to change. People over 60 often reach a stage where they start to see life through a much calmer lens. And one of the most powerful realizations they discover is something the world often forgets. Peace is more valuable than victory. This isn't a lesson most people understand when they are young. It is a lesson learned through experience, through mistakes, through heartbreak, through watching history repeat itself again and again. And by the time someone reaches their 60s or 70s, many realize something very simple. Life becomes better not when we win every battle, but when we learn which battles are not worth fighting at all. Today, we're going to explore some of the quiet truths about peace that people over 60 often understand deeply, truths that the modern world sometimes forgets. And perhaps these reflections can help all of us live with a little more wisdom, patience, and calm. Because peace does not only belong to nations or governments. Sometimes peace begins with something much smaller, a conversation, a decision to forgive, or the simple choice to walk away from conflict. The first thing many people over 60 understand about peace is this: not every disagreement deserves a fight. When people are young, disagreements often feel personal. If someone challenges our opinion, we feel the need to defend it. If someone criticizes us, we feel the need to prove them wrong. But over time, something interesting happens. People begin to realize that many arguments lead nowhere. They don't change minds. They don't solve problems. They only create tension and distance between people. After decades of life, many older adults learn a quiet skill that younger people rarely master. They learn when to stay silent, not because they are weak, but because they understand something powerful. Peace is sometimes more important than being right. They realize that relationships matter more than winning arguments, and that protecting harmony often requires letting go of the need to prove a point. This kind of wisdom does not come from books. It comes from experience, from remembering arguments that damaged friendships, from remembering harsh words spoken in anger, from realizing years later that those battles were never worth the cost. Another truth people over 60 often understand is that most conflicts begin with fear, not hatred. When we look at conflicts in the world, between families, communities, or even nations, it is easy to assume they come from anger. But many older adults see something deeper. They see fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing identity. Fear of losing what feels familiar. When people feel threatened, they often react with anger. But underneath that anger is usually uncertainty. Years of observing human behavior often help older individuals see this pattern more clearly. They begin to recognize that responding to fear with more aggression rarely solves anything. Instead, calmness often diffuses tension more effectively than force. This is one reason older people often become peacemakers in their families. When younger relatives argue, the older generation often steps in, not with louder voices, but with calmer ones. They remind people to breathe, to listen, to slow down. And sometimes that calm presence is enough to prevent small disagreements from becoming lasting divisions. Another lesson people over 60 often understand is that time changes the meaning of many problems. Think about the worries that once seemed enormous in your 20s or 30s. A lost job, a broken relationship, a failed plan. At the time, those problems may have felt overwhelming. But years later, many of those moments look very different. Some even become valuable lessons. Life has a way of reshaping our perspective. People who have lived long enough begin to understand that many crises are temporary. They pass, they fade, and what once seemed unbearable often becomes just another chapter in a long story. This realization brings a certain calmness. It teaches patience. It encourages people not to react too quickly in moments of stress. Instead of escalating conflicts, many older adults pause and ask themselves a quiet question. Will this matter 5 years from now? Very often the answer is no, and that simple realization helps them choose peace over confrontation. Another insight that often grows stronger with age is the understanding that forgiveness is one of the greatest forms of peace. When people are younger, holding on to resentment sometimes feels justified. If someone hurts us, we may believe that anger protects us. But as the years pass, many people begin to notice something surprising. Resentment rarely harms the person who caused the pain. It harms the one who carries it. Holding on to anger can quietly drain emotional energy. It keeps old wounds alive, and it prevents the heart from feeling truly free. Many people over 60 eventually realize that forgiveness is not about excusing what someone did. It is about freeing oneself from the burden of bitterness. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it allows the future to feel lighter. And that is a powerful form of peace. Another truth people often discover later in life is that peace grows stronger through understanding, not victory. When conflicts arise, many people instinctively focus on proving their side is correct. But older adults often see something different. They recognize that every person carries a unique story, a unique set of experiences, a unique perspective shaped by their life. When we take the time to listen deeply to others, something interesting happens. Even if we still disagree, we begin to understand why the other person feels the way they do, and that understanding can soften conflict. It creates space for empathy. It reminds us that the person on the other side of an argument is not an enemy. They are simply another human being navigating life with their own fears, hopes, and memories. This realization is one reason conversations with older individuals often feel calmer and more thoughtful. They have learned that listening is sometimes more powerful than speaking. Another important insight people over 60 often develop is that peace in the world begins with peace inside ourselves. The world today moves quickly. News cycles constantly highlight conflict, division, and crisis. It can feel as though tension exists everywhere. But older generations often carry a quieter understanding. Large-scale peace begins with small-scale behavior. The way we treat family members, the way we respond to disagreement, the way we speak to strangers. Every small act of patience or kindness contributes to a culture of peace. And every act of hostility or resentment adds tension to the world. This perspective encourages many older adults to focus less on changing the entire world and more on changing the small circle around them. A peaceful home, a respectful conversation, a patient response to frustration. These small choices may seem simple, but over time, they shape the emotional environment of communities and families. Another lesson that often emerges with age is the realization that life itself is fragile and temporary. When people are young, the future feels endless. Time appears abundant. But as the decades pass, the value of time becomes clearer. Older adults often become more aware that life moves quickly. Friends grow older. Loved ones pass away. Moments that once felt ordinary become precious memories. This awareness creates a powerful shift in priorities. Arguments lose importance. Petty disagreements feel smaller, and the desire for peace grows stronger. Because when people understand that time is limited, they often become more careful about how they spend it. They choose connection over conflict, understanding over judgment, peace over pride. And perhaps the deepest lesson people over 60 understand about peace is this. Peace is not something we find after life struggles are over. Peace is something we practice during them. Life will always contain challenges. There will always be disagreements. There will always be uncertainty. But the way we respond to those challenges shapes the emotional quality of our lives. Some people spend decades fighting every battle, defending every opinion, holding on to every grievance. Others gradually learn a different approach. They learn to pause before reacting, to listen before judging, to forgive before resentment takes root. And through those choices, they discover something remarkable. Peace is not weakness. Peace is wisdom. It is the strength to remain calm in a world that often rewards aggression. It is the courage to choose understanding when anger would be easier. And it is the maturity to recognize that harmony often requires humility. The world today moves fast. Opinions clash constantly. Voices grow louder. But perhaps this is exactly why the wisdom of older generations matters so much. Because after 60 years of living, many people begin to see life with greater clarity. They realize that peace is not something distant. It is something we build every day through our choices, our words, and our attitudes toward others. And when we listen to the quiet wisdom of those who have lived long lives, we are reminded of something simple but powerful. A peaceful life is not created by winning every battle. It is created by choosing which battles are truly worth fighting. And most of the time, the battles worth fighting are the ones that protect kindness, understanding, and compassion. Everything else can often be left behind. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. What lesson about peace has life taught you over the years? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else see life a little differently. And if you enjoy thoughtful reflections about life after 60, consider subscribing to After 60 Life Wisdom, because sometimes the greatest wisdom about life comes not from winning more battles, but from learning how to live with more peace.